Good morning, Phoenix, and welcome to the House of Mystery radio show. And this is the place to come for true crime, conspiracy, and alternative history. Only on KFNX 1100 Independent Talk Radio. We're here every Saturday morning, 6 to 7 a.m., and I'm your host, Al Warren. You're back in the House of Mystery on KFNX Phoenix. Now, we're back in the true crime formula today, and we have an author, and it's a really interesting book, kind of a different point of view on true crime. That's really what caught my eye. And the book is called SketchCop, and it's Drawing a Line Against Crime. And we were lucky enough to have the author. His name is Michael Streed. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Al.
So here we go. Excellent book. And how did you yourself get into writing the book, SketchCop?
Well, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. The idea first came up back in the early 2000s, probably about 2003. My wife, at the time, had suggested maybe I write a book. We were in my office one day, and she pointed at my file cabinet and said, "You should write a book." And I said, "What am I going to write about?" She said, "No, look at all the cases you've done and such. And I think people would be interested in reading about it." And I kind of pushed it aside, and then she became sick with cancer, and I used that as a way of kind of dealing with it. And when she was undergoing chemotherapy, I was writing just to kind of be close by and have something to do. And I was able to finish the book, and unfortunately, she passed away shortly after it was published.
Oh, sorry.
And it, I was new to the world of publishing, and the publisher that I went with, I think there were some contractual issues and some problems that I think any author has probably experienced when trying to get started and being a little overexcited and maybe not reading the contracts closely. So I let the rights revert back to me, and I got married again. I got busy with finishing my police career, and my new wife, who's an avid reader, said, maybe you should dust off the manuscript, maybe retouch it and touch it up and try to get it republished again. So I was lucky enough to find Wild Blue Press, and they took a look at it, and I was humbled that they offered me a contract and wanted to republish it, and here it is.
Here it is. So what was your life up to writing the book? Where do you get your experience?
Well, unlike a lot of authors who have experience as journalists, as true crime writers for newspapers and such, I took the opposite approach. Is I just actually went out and experienced it. And so I think there's a couple different ways of approaching it. Either you can do it and write about it later, and or you can experience it from the other end like they do. And I think both are unique perspectives. For me, I just figured I spent thousands of pages writing police reports, and the challenge is taking that technical style of writing and telling the stories, the same stories, in a creative way that would touch and resonate with people.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting area. I haven't read anything about any SketchCop anywhere before, so it's a new area in true crime. How long did you do this kind of work for with the police?
I'm actually still doing it.
Okay.
But it's been 35 years now. And, I went through various phases in terms of cases I've worked, and I've recorded them in the book. And, most cases that a police sketch artist draws are cases that will probably never even make the news. A person walking down the street and getting jacked for their iPhone, liquor store robbery, barely makes the paper. Maybe the sketch makes it in or not. And every so often during your career, you'll be fortunate yet unfortunate enough to be involved in a high-profile headline-making case like a child abduction murder or a serial killer case. And if you stay in the business long enough, and depending upon what area of this country you live in, you're probably going to experience something like that.
So what kind of training did you have to get into this kind of work?
I have over 700 hours of classroom and technical training from anywhere from the FBI to the University of Oklahoma. I've been to some private art schools, had several hundred hours of training with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I've been lucky enough to have been mentored by some of the greatest police sketch artists of all time, people that were old school, people that worked on cases like the Martin Luther King assassination, the Night Stalker case, the Mary Vincent case, this young hitchhiker back in the 70s who was dismembered and disfigured, had her arms chopped off by a kidnapper and brutally raped and such. And these people were lucky enough to take me under their wing and teach me about what they did. So the combination of the mentorship I had plus the classroom experience brought me to where I am today.
I was just wondering, how does it feel when you're actually doing it? How do you know that you get it right? Or it's hard for me to put that in words, but when you're doing it, how do you know the confidence level? Where does it come from?
The look on the person's face, their reaction. I've had victims get up and run out of the room and go throw up in a trash can. I've had them start trembling and burst into tears. And I think that those types of visceral reactions are a great gauge for me or any other sketch artist who does this to get an idea that they're on the path to success, that if the police are able to distribute the sketch in the right places and the right person sees it, that it's going to result in an arrest. On the flip side, I've had people that were very boastful and just verbalized that they had it right, that they're really sure, and they were totally wrong.
And that's kind of another point too, because if witnesses I hear quite often when I do these interviews are not necessarily the most reliable.
They aren't, and those are the cases that you generally hear about because, some poor person spends decades in prison wrongfully convicted. And I think part of that is that police in general, and I was a police officer, a sergeant for 31 years. I was a detective for 10 out of those 31 years. And so I've seen it from that side as well. But, police are very slow to change. They're very slow to adapt. And there's a lot of studies out there. And I think it's a lack of training. And I think it's business as usual. For example, we would show what they call a six-pack or a photo lineup. 6 pictures. The suspect is one of them. The rest of them, by law, they have to look similar and not so different that the suspect stands out. Well, studies have shown that doing a sequential double-blind lineup is more reliable. In other words, you give them a stack of photographs that they look at individually one by one, given by a detective who has no stake in the case. And that's proven to be a way of minimizing these wrongful IDs and the wrongful convictions. But again, police are reluctant to do that because it takes extra time. It's what they consider more of a hassle, so to speak. And so until they start widely doing that, you're going to have that. But on the flip side, again, my portfolio is full of people that did get it right. And even some of the most ardent, high-profile psychology professors who study eyewitness identification will tell you that, yes, people do get it right. They're not all unreliable.
Right. How have you noticed a big change in the type of equipment you use, and how is it going with the computer world nowadays? Has it made it easier for you?
It has. Well, technology helps, more people get involved. For example, I used to take a traditional pen and paper or pencil and paper out to a crime scene and sketch pictures. Now with technology, I do it remotely. As a matter of fact, I do sketches for the City of Baltimore Police Department from my office in California via remote access. And the person can watch me sketch right on my screen and guide me through. And I wasn't able to do that, 5-10 years ago. My company's developed software that helps police departments that don't have sketch artists by providing a program and training that can train anywhere from a clerk typist to the chief of police how to create composites and such. So, as we move forward, the technology is going to make it easier for departments to access and create these faces.
Wow, that's interesting. So now you've got a company that you run right now that deals with training of SketchCops, right? That's
true, yes. SketchCop Solutions and our SketchCop face design system, facial composite software, is gaining a lot of popularity amongst law enforcement because a lot of agencies don't have the money these days to justify a full-time position for a sketch artist to be on staff. And so what they can do for less than the price of training someone, they can train their entire department how to use the software and put together sketches that are every bit as effective as those provided by sketch artists.
Wow. How long does it take them to get through your training, your program?
I provide anywhere between 2 to 4 days worth of training, and it's not just so much on the software itself as much as it is on the science of eyewitness identification and how to interview somebody, how to put together a sketch. Because it's not so much, whether you're a sketch artist or whether you're using software, you can quickly draw any face. You can quickly, assemble any face with software. But it's getting the information, and that's why with sketch artists it's critical that not only they have, average to above average artistic skills, but they have to be good communicators, if not great communicators, because it's all about making that connection and getting the information out and onto paper.
Is there some criteria, like how when you meet someone, is there something that sticks out that makes you think that might be a good person for this kind of job?
Yes, I think that when people come in, and I have a lot of people tell me all the time, I'm a good artist. I do great portraits, and I said that's fine. That's great. I would love to see your work, because artists are proud of their work. But again, it's not about the art; it's about the ability to communicate. And so I would rather have somebody who's an average to above average artist that's a great communicator, that has great empathy towards people and great listening skills, versus somebody who is so ego invested in their art and they're a great artist, but they won't stop and listen long enough to get the information from people. So it's a balance. But again, if you can't talk to somebody, or you can't really take the time to listen, then you're not going to be successful in this business.
Yeah. What do you think the most case that probably affected you the most, that stays with you even after years?
I think the child cases, anytime a child is abducted and murdered, it sticks with you. I've been involved in 3 of California's highest profile child abductions, dating back to 1983, when a little girl was, she disappeared from a campground out in the desert. And, her remains were eventually found, but, witnesses said she was seen leaving with 2 people, a man and a woman. Other people theorized she may have wandered off. But either way, she was 3 years old and she was missing, and I was involved in sketching the potential suspects in that case. And then in 1997, a 10-year-old boy was abducted and later found murdered out in Beaumont, California, Anthony Martinez, and he was abducted by a serial child murderer, Joseph Edward Duncan, and then who's sitting on federal death row now. And then in 2002, when Samantha Runnion was abducted and murdered. She was 5 years old. And I think the amazing thing with that case that everybody remembers was her 5-year-old playmate provided me with a description of the suspect that was so dead on that he was arrested within a couple days of the sketch being released. I mean, at least he was identified then and was arrested a few days after that, and he's sitting on California's death row right now. So anytime a vulnerable child who can't protect themselves is grabbed off the streets and brutally raped and strangled and killed by an abductor, those are the ones that stick with you. Yeah.
Stay with you a long time. How long do you stay involved in a case? Like when you get called in to do a sketch, do you just do that and leave, or do you stay with the case?
I do the sketch and I leave. I keep in touch with the detectives just to get some feedback. Obviously, if it's a case that makes international headlines like the cases I just referred to, those are easy to follow because they're part of the news cycle. And as soon as someone's arrested, of course, the police departments want to let people know so the fear in the community will be greatly reduced and things can quote get back to normal, even though these communities never really get back to normal. But the cases that I do generally that don't make the news, every couple months I reach out to the detective because they get busy too, and they forget to let me know that they caught somebody. But I don't hang around. I mean, they need me for a particular service. I provide the service, and then I'm on to the next case.
Yeah. And what do you think the biggest misconception of sketch artists are?
I think the biggest misconception is that one, that it just takes us a few minutes to draw the sketch, and the biggest one I think is that the sketch is supposed to look exactly like the suspect. Sometimes it does, most times it doesn't. Most times it's a general enough likeness that it resonates with somebody and they point them out. And I've had sketches that look nothing, in my opinion, look nothing like the person, and the detective says, hey man, this is dead on. This looks just like the guy. When I look at the sketch and the booking photo, I'm like, I don't see it, but you know what? It worked.
Yeah. Oh, it must be what people look at. Like if you focus on eyes or you focus, don't you find people do that? Like when you're talking to witnesses and things, they'll notice something in particular.
They do, and I always ask them at the outset, before we get started, is there anything about this person that would make them stand out in a crowd, or from someone that of a similar race or similar type, and most of the time, nothing pops out at them because when they're victimized or when they witness something, well, first of all, if they're a witness, sometimes they don't even realize that they're witnessing a crime. If they're a victim, it happens in the dark. It happens so fast. They can barely see it. But sometimes there's something that does pop out and stand out, and that's helpful.
Yeah. How do you think the business has changed? Is there sketch artists? Is there plenty of them now? Are they in all the police forces, or is it something just shared?
There's probably more now than there's ever been. When I got back in when I first went through training back in 1979, 1980, there were maybe like a handful of sketch artists operating, and now most police departments have somebody that does it on a part-time basis. But what I think, is really having an effect on the industry right now are surveillance cameras, cell phone cameras. I think the industry is going more towards, development of facial recognition software programs and programs that will, enhance or modify the face to make them ready for these facial recognition software systems. So I wouldn't say that sketch artists are going to go the way of the dinosaur, go the way of the dodo, as I like to say. But their duties are going to be greatly changed, and they're going to have to make adjustments, or we're all going to have to go back to sketching bowls of fruit again.
So, what do you think the future is? Do you think it's a dying art, or is it just going to change? My personal feeling is, and I'm writing about it in this book I'm working on now, is that
I think we're going to make a move from forensic artists to facial imaging technicians. And I think that the way the technology is being developed, I think technician is a very good term, because it's not going to be a field driven by artists or practiced by artists per se. You're going to have people who are good interviewers or good with people, who can use the facial composite software. They're computer savvy. They understand social media. They know how to drive this stuff. The facial recognition software, while it's very good, the human eye is still much better at comparing faces. So, you're going to have them examining maybe like a mugshot versus a photo of a bank robber to identify that person. And so it's going to be more technology driven. So what happens to the forensic artist, someone like myself, is that, they'll be more involved in doing the work that maybe the technology hasn't automated or nearly automated yet, and that really takes an artistic skill, and maybe they'll become the quality control managers for the facial imaging technicians moving forward. So I think they'll have a reduced role in some areas, but a greatly enhanced role in others.
And the interview aids, what's your feeling on that?
In terms of what do you mean by the interview aids?
Well, so like in some of your blogs and how you talk about references of photo references during a composite interview.
Oh, of course, yeah. I think that people are very good at describing features to an extent, but I think that they can show us better than they can tell us. And I think that some psychologists will argue that it contaminates memory, while others say no. Recognition is stronger than verbal recall, so it really kind of reinforces what they're telling you. So I think if you show a controlled amount of photos during your interview, you're going to reduce the likelihood that you're going to contaminate that memory further. So I think aids are very good. They've been very helpful to people who have poor verbal skills or maybe don't speak English well, or it's the whole tip of the tongue thing. They can't really put their finger on it, but they can show you. So that's where that comes in and works.
Well, it's pretty interesting work. So in your book, what do you think the most interesting thing people are going to get out of it?
I think people are going to get an appreciation for what goes into putting together a sketch. I mean, we see sketches all the time on the news. We see them in the newspaper, online, various social media outlets, and I don't know that people really give much thought to what goes into it. And I think when they read the book and see that it's just a bit more technical than that it's more than just about art, they'll probably be very surprised. And I think even more so, I think that there's an element of the book SketchCop, Drawing a Line Against Crime, gives the true crime reader really the best of both worlds. They get a great understanding for how it is that we do the work, and then they get to read about the cases I've been involved in that these sketches have played a part in. And I don't go real heavy on the sketch as much as, we fairly cover the case from start to finish. So all the other elements of evidence that play into the case and the detective's great work and stuff like that, it's not all about me and my sketch. It's about the role that it played and how it integrated in with others in terms of investigative techniques and other evidence and stuff to catch this crook. Because I've always said at the end of the day, whether it's my sketch or DNA or fingerprints or dogged detective work, I don't care who gets the credit as long as the crook goes to jail. It's a team effort.
Yeah, it has to be. It's really about justice, I would say, at the end. And how do you feel about the way the justice system is being portrayed lately? With cops and things like that in the media.
I think the media has done a horrible job of portraying police officers. I've been in the business 35 years now, and I'm from a family of police officers, and I just think that I think it's dishonest reporting. I think that they're sensationalizing a few cases just to sell newspapers. I think that they're trying to influence, society's behavior towards certain classes of people, and I think it's a very dangerous thing that they're doing, because I've never worked with a police officer. I've worked with plenty of police agencies, plenty of police officers, federal, state, local, and I've never heard anyone ever say or plan to go out and kill somebody. I'm not going to say it never happens, but the majority of police officers are committed to their communities and want to go out and do a great job. And I think that some of these cases that happen, you can always go back and look and say, well, maybe they should have done it differently. But if you look at the spirit and the intent of what they do and the quickness in which these cases develop, because they're very dynamic, these situations, I think it's just unfair for them to portray the police the way they are.
Yeah. Yeah, and people have to take into account what it's like to actually be out there and doing the job, be in the shoes,
They really do, and I think that society and people in general have to take a step back and examine their role and how they contribute to behavior, because again, it's like physics. For every action is a reaction. I mean, I used to have people come in and complain, and we hate the police, and the police do this, this, and this, and my response to them was, okay, that's great. We hire people, we hire police officers from the human race, so they are going to make mistakes. But what have you done? What has your community done to better itself? How do you police your community to make sure that you take responsibility and accountability for your actions? And why are the police there in the first place?
Yeah. There's a lot of things to take into account, and I know when I see a lot of the reports, the thing I always notice is how you don't really get the feel for the area or the people. You're not there. It's so much different than what you see on TV.
It is, and even when you read the book, there's a chapter about one of my first sketches where a person was wrongly convicted. And you can sit there and look and say, well, you made a mistake, you made a mistake, you made a mistake. But I think that if you look at it in total, I think the biggest thing that, whether you're a sketch artist or you're a detective or a street cop or whatever, you have to go back and take a look at, why something went wrong and what you would do in the future to make sure that it went right the next time. But I think it's hard to do, when you're always trying to play catch up, so to speak, and because when you're spending time trying to, satisfy or appease people and you're spending more time in the apology mode than you are really examining what went wrong and how we fix it. Because a lot of these things, they can be corrected. It's just a matter of everyone, again, sketch artists have to be good listeners. Police, the public, we all have to come together and listen and have a better understanding for one another. And I think that'll help solve some of the problems. But that's not great. That's not a great headline, though. So
it's not going to sell the papers.
It's not going to sell the papers, and so.
Yeah.
And that's part of what I do too, as well. Is I tell I try to educate police departments. In terms of, people are interested in crime. People are scared of crime. And I think that, the role I play is sometimes to provide a graphic for that story, so to speak. Look at the Unabomber. Mm-hmm. Everybody remembers the sketch, the hood, the glasses. They were making T-shirts with the sketch on it, for God's sakes. But that became the signature, sketch for that case. So I think there's, in this day of social media, so to speak, I encourage them to supercharge their social media, so to speak, by adding a sketch, by adding a surveillance photo, by doing something to engage the community. Because, again, when the community feels like they're part of something, everything goes much better for everybody. It's the same thing when people come into my office. To get them to engage means to make them feel like they're part of solving their own case, and that's what these sketches do a lot of times.
Yeah. So, what do you feel about the new policemen coming up, the new police force, the young people now? Do you feel it's going in a good direction?
I think so. I think that, despite the, again, I think despite the bad press, I think that, people are still, it's a great career. I do it all over again. I loved it. I mean, I remember lacing my boots up the last shift because, I knew that was my last shift. I was going to retire at the end of watch. It was going to be done. But I loved, I thought, God, I love this job. It's just, there's just so many great things about it, and it's still an honorable career. And I think that, I just think that the young people coming up today, I think they had different life experiences that may not have made them as well prepared as generations past, but that doesn't mean that they can't adapt and do a great job out there and make significant impact. Yeah,
it's a good thing. So where do you see yourself going now?
I'm nowhere near quitting. I still provide, I still work on cases actively for law enforcement, writing books. I've got, I have a plan, so to speak, on other true crime books, in terms of how I want to present them. I just see myself as never slowing down or quitting. Oh, I want to be the person chasing the hearse.
So you're going to continue to write true crime, sort of?
I am, and I'm excited about it because, SketchCop, Drawing a Line Against Crime was pretty much my introductory, as a way of introducing myself to the true crime readers, through sharing what I do and what I know, in terms of how I've helped solve crime. But I think moving forward, I'll select, particular cases that I find interesting, that I think the public will find interesting. I think we're inundated with, a lot of the sensational stuff you see in ID Discovery, which is very successful. In terms of the interfamily crimes and the love triangles and the things with some sort of titillation and such. And I just want to go back to writing about just regular, everyday, real people. People are fascinated by the O.J. Simpson case and high profile murders, people that they know or they may have admired. I just want to cover the everyday person that was out there working for a living, in my book, where I talk about the ATM guard, this retired cop that retired earlier than he wanted to because of a knee injury. He's just out there trying to make a living, divorced, living a very simple lifestyle, and gets abducted and murdered over a few bucks. But yet that case was very interesting because of all the different types of circumstantial evidence and the demeanor and the type of criminal he was. And I think people are interested because it could be them. It's easier for them to relate to.
Yeah. Now, have you had any experience outside of the U.S. Or other countries doing much the same sort of thing with the SketchCop?
They are. Sketch artists, while sketching here seems to kind of, ebb and flow, so to speak, and I think that if you talk to a lot of sketch artists, they'll probably tell you they're seeing less and less requests for their work all the time. I think it's still pretty strong over in Europe and the Middle East. I think, in facial recognition and facial comparisons and anything doing like facial forensics and such is popular overseas. I think that, they're ahead of the curve, so to speak, and will remain ahead of the curve. So it's not dying off totally. It's just, there's just a shift in the marketplace, so to speak. Yeah. Oh yeah. Computer generation.
So how do people get a hold of you? Now, if someone has an idea or they want to contact you or they're interested in your sketch training, how do they do that?
They could go to my website at www.sketchcop.com, and they can there's a contact area there that they can drop me a line. I'm on Facebook at the SketchCop, and also on Twitter at SketchCop, and they can send me a message through any of those mediums and ask a question about the book, ask a question about the software or training, whether they're law enforcement or someone interested in getting into the field, I'll be glad. This is the greatest part about my job, is the fact that I get to communicate with all sorts of people. I remember having a woman after a sketch in Baltimore. We were sitting in my office, and she's the victim of a crime, and she said, "Don't you get bored sitting here just like sketching all day long?" And I said, I enjoy the sketching part of it. I said, but what's more fascinating is everyone who walks through this door. Everyone has a story to tell. Every one of us. They say, well, everyone has a book inside of them. And maybe they do. They don't know how to put it out. But if they don't have a book, they've got a story to tell. I've had people come through my office, opera singers, doctoral candidates, CEOs, a grandmother who worked as a prostitute on the weekends. I mean, the list went on and on and on. Each of them had a story to tell. I tried to write them down as quick as I could so I wouldn't forget them, and they're just fascinating. So I extend that into other areas. Whether it's writing the book and having fans who enjoy the book and want to follow me, and or people who want to break into the industry and become a sketch artist themselves for the police department and such. So for me, it's all about the people. It's a people job, and I love it.
Yeah, and I would say people must have. They're really glad to see you. I would say of all the police, they like seeing you when they come into your office.
I try to provide a warm, comfortable atmosphere. I mean, obviously now I go on site to police departments locally, or I connect to them. I even had a sketch request actually from Romania. One time they wanted me to do the sketch online, and I was able to refer them to a local Romanian police sketch artist I was familiar with. But when I had office hours in Baltimore there, I mean, I had a picture up of a cartoon, a caricature of all the wise guys from all the mafia gangster movies. And people come in and they would, they'd stop and they'd look and they'd start naming all the people, and it just jumped off into like a conversation about what was going on with them and how they got there in the first place, and whether it's giving a bottle of water, a cup of coffee, or walking them downtown to get a sandwich or something, and walking back talking about the crime and stuff. I think that they felt good about being there because most people, they actually want to be more proactive in helping solve their own crimes. And when they felt like they were a part of it, they were glad to be there.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Do any of the shows that you like watching about crime on TV, anything that you think they do it really well?
I think that I'm a big Criminal Minds fan. I like watching the shows that have some sort of cerebral element, so to speak. I mean, I used to watch Cops until I figured out that, wait a minute, I go out there and live this stuff 10 hours a night. So let's get involved in something that that I don't do typically. So I got into forensic files for quite a while. I was a real big forensic files junkie. And then the ones where they, the shows where they interview killers and stuff like that. I don't gravitate towards the ones where there's like bloodlust and some sensational type of thing. I like the more, that has some sort of, twist and turn and something unusual. I'll tell you the show I really like though. It's the one with the Greed and Scandal show with all these people that are out there ripping off people through fraud and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's a really good with Bill Curtis. He does some good work. He does some really great work. So, but lately I haven't had time to watch any TV because I'm busy writing and busy doing casework and such. So, yeah.
Who influences you in writing?
I was a big Joseph Wambaugh fan for years. I liked I liked the way he wrote fiction, and the way he portrayed police was really good. I read a sensational book called Storming Vegas by John Huddy, and he wrote in a style that I would love to write true crime in. But then I've been told I'm a good storyteller as well. People like my writing style, but I think that I tend to skew more towards biographies. So especially autobiographies. I like people who tell their own stories. So I don't necessarily have a favorite writer in terms of nonfiction as much as, I just enjoy reading other people's success stories.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Well, it's really interesting, and thank you for talking with me today on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. Like I say, I love what I do, and I love sharing what I do, and I'm always glad to talk about it.
Yeah. Again, the book is called SketchCop, Drawing a Line Against Crime, and the author is Michael Streed. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Al.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of the Z-Talk Radio Network.
I'll be back.